So I'm going to draw this guy, John, and he approached me this week and said, would I draw his portrait? And I said yes immediately, because obviously you've probably seen his portrait many times that some famous artists have done. But he sent me a load of images, and this is the one that I chose. All kinds of reasons. I think that it's probably because the balance of the beard to the head is fairly close. I like the dark side of the face there. It gives it more of shape and form. It's a better composition for me. There's just some great kind of, you can see it's like diagonals and things. It looks like a significant portrait. I did fiddle with it in Photoshop, so it's got a bit more oomph, should we say. But yeah, I'm using hazelwood charcoal, make it myself, and I find it better than the sort of the bought stuff, anything that's, vines and things. I've tried all of those. I didn't really try bought to start with. I always made my own. Tried it just by comparison, but the trouble is, once you've committed and you're sort of used to working in a certain way, you always want, you compare to that. So it's better I stick with this. So it's not a struggle. I just cook the thing in this tin, and the twigs, and they come out kind of like that. And that's it. It's nothing, as I say, it's nothing, not an ordeal to do it. So I might as well do it, and I get better effects with it. I get more pleasing effects. The combination of this and the paper, which is, as I say, the cheap cartridge, it works really well. So anyway, the first thing for me is always about where this is going to fit on the paper, because it's I need to visualize where that's going to end up, and then the first thing I need to do after that then is to find out where all the elements are. So I usually do something. We talk about the dots in the class, but I usually do a kind of a scribble thing, but it's not a scribble. It's just me trying to figure out where things are going to end up, and it can manifest in all kinds of ways. I mean, I'm not really. There is no technique to this. There is no definitive way of doing this. So I tend to sort of meander around, as I say, and just figure out where things are, and then, because one of the things I've got to do, I've got to make sure that I can get it all on the paper with the beard being so big. But I think that's about right. And as I said, I'm aware of this balance of the two sides of it. So. So the first stage, as I say, it can be anything. I mean, I always think of this as like a shorthand of that I developed to tell myself what I'm looking at, whether or not I need to sort of focus on something or whatever. I do. That's really what this section is about for me. So it's not about the drawing at the moment. This is just about figuring out where things are gonna land, if you like, or where they should land. And once I've got to a point where I'm happy with the alignments, I'm happy with the distances, then the next thing is to look at the shapes. And I find the shapes with tone, just by applying tone. I don't really outline shapes and then colour them in. I'm more interested in the building of the shapes. To find the shapes and then apply tone to them, it does two things. It does build the tones of the shapes and the tones of the face at the same time as finding the shapes. So, which is really it suits the way I work, because it's more a progressive thing. It's more of a evolution of a face or a portrait, rather than a specific. This is the way it's going to out. This is the outcome I'm going for, and whatever. It's not that. I'm not that. I don't have any expectations of an outcome. I know it's a portrait, and people expect the look-alike thing, like this thing. I'm not. For me, it's more about the life force. So I'm focus on that, and that's the thing that drives everything. So my response to this life force, and I've said many times, this is a conversation that I'm having with the face. So my response to this face and the conversation I'm having is the most important thing. So I've passed the introduction stage, I've passed the hello, how are you doing stage, and I'm now looking at the shapes, and I'm getting to know the face better, and I'm starting to be more specific about the components as I draw them, and it's it can. The thing is, with this approach, for me, with this approach, it can be quite rapid because of the application of tone early on. You know, and often you'll see people that will do outlines which they then apply tone to. I'm applying tone almost before I found the shapes, which is different, if you like, to the sort of standard approach. So I'm almost working back to front. So this is the tones going on when I should be sort of tying things down, and I'm not doing that. I'm indicating where things are, shapes in particular are, with tone at this stage early on. And what I do is it will slow down. It will, after I've got to a point where I'm happy with where everything is, it slows down, and that's when I start to take care about with the tones and the shapes and the lines in general. It doesn't happen straight away. It happens at the end for me, which is, as I say, it feels as though it's back to front. Because the other thing as well is that this is a kind of an evolutionary thing. So it's always evolving to as the shapes evolve, and I'm always changing them and refining them. It's one of those, as I say, evolutionary type of things. And the other side to it as well, I'm going to swap the chart because it's a bit scratchy that. The other side to it is that you get a lot of accidental mark making, which is kind of a serendipitous thing. I end up with marks that are that do exactly what they need to do, but they're not necessarily specifically drawn. I don't intend to make these marks, so which is good. I like that bit. I like the adventure, if you like, of that, and it just results in a different kind of drawing. For me, it's much more of a full of life kind of approach. It's because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to capture the life of this face. So I consequently, as I said, I like this approach better than if it was a more contrived thing, more precise and contrived. So you get a lot of odd marks that shouldn't be there, and sometimes I'll leave them on because I like it. I like the wrongness of things. I always think that is, partly because it tells me if I'm genuinely going to follow it through. It tells me where the right marks should be, because that's what the wrong marks do. But the other side to it is that it tells the viewer something. The viewer sees marks that aren't quite right. I'm not saying that you sort of do it deliberately, but the wrong marks sort of speak to the viewer in a different way. Even down to you talk about the lost edges and stuff, when it's suggestion and implication that you're focusing on. You basically, you're asking them to complete the picture. This is what normally suggestion implication, or lost edges as they call it, is normally what that's trying to do. But when there's wrong marks as well, sometimes they'll complete that part of it. And as I said, it's like it's a different dimension to portraiture. It's because I'm not really focusing on his nose, or when I talked about this with the students, it's always, we're not drawing noses and eyes. We're not drawing noses and eyes and mouths. We're drawing shapes and tone. It's as simple as that. And it's almost like irrelevant how you execute it, how you render something. So I often say to people, we want to draw regardless of execution. We want it to be effective and communicate the face regardless of the execution. which is weird because it's like this is all about execution. Surely it's all about how you sort of manage the tones and how you drag the charcoal around and all that. I mean, it's not really. It's something much more sophisticated than that, because that's just you know, anybody could do it kind of thing. You just have to practice enough and read enough books. So, but it's not that. It's not that at all. Portraits are always much more than just the lines that make them and the shading that makes them. It's always much more. You can't make a portrait when it is just about those things. You can make a good copy of somebody's face, but you can't make a great portrait if it's just about those basic things. And this is the problem. People will come to portraits. People come to my lessons expecting it to be about 1, 2, 3. This is how you alter charcoal. This is how you create the tones and all the rest of it. And I never talk about things like that. I'm not really interested in things like that, to be quite honest. I think it's so much more. It's so much more, and that's me coming from a highly technical background all those years ago before I stopped doing it. So, and the reason I stopped was because of the technical stuff, because I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it. I thought it was much more than this, but I didn't know. No one told me that about the stuff that I talk about with my students, and so consequently, I gave it up and started again in 2019. But I'd never drawn portraits until 2019. So, but the mindset thing that drives this is it's fundamental. I can't tell you how important it is to have the right mindset. It's just everything that you think you know about drawing, forget it. If you haven't got the right mindset, it's just going to be copy. I mean, that's not what it is to make portraits. Copy my face kind of thing. That's not a portrait. A good portrait artist would understand that that's not what we're about. But it's when you're starting out, and I mean, I didn't really look at anybody's work. I wasn't interested in other people's work, and I just deliberately not interested. And I wasn't interested in anatomy and methods and all that kind of stuff. I just wasn't interested. I just wanted to do this thing, and I still just want to do this thing. I'm still not interested in all those other stuff. But people ask me about, because I do so many and I'm everywhere with them, and people ask me all the time how and why and all that. So that's what I do. I teach as much as I can and sort of help them to experience the liberation that I've experienced. I think that's the thing, because I was them. I was the archetypal that was, stifled by self-doubt and all that kind of thing, crippled even, and so I know exactly what they're going through. So that's why I do it, really. I try and explain it as best I can, which I'm trying to do now, but I don't want to explain it too much, because it's their journey, and all I want to do is just unlock the door for them then to sort of fly free, and that is probably why it's not as specific as you might think. I deliberately don't talk about technique. I'll talk about this as a technique, if you like, which is the location of things, the identification of shapes and the development of tones. I talk about it in that way, but that's not complicated stuff. That's just a means for me to express myself. So learning those basics is all just a means to an end. I don't think these basics are the drawing, are the portrait. These basics are just a way for me to capture the life force that I'm trying to do, which is what I'm trying to do. You can see how it develops now. As I say, it's tonally. It's the shaping is the tones, but I have this thing of, because it's my only intention is to capture the life force. So if at some point it appears that I've caught the life force, I'm often, and I do this, I'm often tempted just to stop, because that's just its job done. You know, how I render the thing is irrelevant. How I render the beard is irrelevant. What's relevant is that I capture the life force. And if I feel as though I've caught it, then 9 times out of 10 I will stop. Anything after that is just showing off, you know, or it's just going to make the thing less effective. Because one of the things I learned early on, one of the things about portraits is you've got to focus on what's important. You know, if it's the eyes, if it's the beard, if it's the hair, it's whatever, that's the thing that you focus on. Everything else is just secondary. And then people will, you know, sort of people who are skills orientated will turn the beard into a challenge, and that's what they'll focus on. But for me, it's not the beard that's the challenge. The challenge is capturing the life force. And if I meet that challenge, then I've job done. So it's not about the techniques that I've employed and things. But yeah, it's as you can see, it's quite a rapid way of working. I don't know how long we've been going, but it's a much quicker way of working than more of a traditional way of doing it. But as I say, I'm not really concerned with the traditional way of doing things. It's more it's more my joy than anybody else's, I suppose. But if it's a portrait, then it's obviously about their joy as well. But I think that if I put my life into it, if I put my soul into this, then they'll see that, and they'll appreciate the joy as well. So it's like, you know, it's a different thing. It's a different thing to what you normally expect of someone doing a portrait. I couldn't do it any other way. It's got to be a response for me, because that's what portraits are about. And if I don't do that, then I'm not doing it right, as far as I'm concerned. It's not it's just, I slip back into that sometimes, you know. I do slip back into that age-old thing of it about being about technique, and it's terrible. I suffer from that sometimes. And the best way to get around that, and you've probably seen me doing the starts thing, is I do loads of starts. And I think we did 6 starts in a day. So just to get to a stage where you could recognise it, you know, within, and it's nothing about speed. Somebody was telling me today about how they took these courses about you've got to do 10-minute sketches and 15-minute sketches and all that, and it's just rubbish. You don't want to get into that at all. It's not about how quickly you can do it. It's not about quickly you can, because everybody thinks it's a technique, or you're going to learn to draw quickly. It's not about that. And that it's a danger. And I'm sure the people that instigate these time trials realise this, but the people that do them think it's about how quickly you can draw, and it's not at all about that. But you know, because it might be, for some of them, it might be how well you can render something, or accurately capture a particular element of the, you know, get things in the right place. It might be that kind of thing, but I don't think anybody should consider a time trial thing, because it's like it's all kinds of stress. I mean, it's a stressful thing anyway. I mean, I don't feel much stress doing it, but there was a time when I did. But I wouldn't want to fall foul of that, and I would never do it with the students. We'd never do it. You've got 10 minutes to do this, and you know, and 10 minutes to do that, 15 minutes, and we'll do then a long pose and all that sort of thing. I'd never do that. I just don't think it's something you should consider. You know, how quickly it takes you. You know, you can do it, and it's not. I can't see the benefit in it at all. I'm sure somebody's going to tell me what the benefit is, but I personally can't see the benefit in putting that kind of pressure on someone. You know, particularly when they're learning, which is what this person was like this morning, and she'd gone to these classes, and it was, you've got 10 minutes to draw this face kind of thing. I think it was figures, and that's not good. It's not good at all. The argument that I sometimes use is that this is me connecting to a face, and the level of concentration required to connect to a face and a persona that is the right kind of connection, the kind of deep personal connection with the face, that's exhausting. So you can't do that over time. You can only do it in small. It's like holding your breath. You kind of hold your breath for so long, but you got to come up for air. And I think that's why I tend to work quickly, because of that, because of this focus, this level of focus that's required. But yeah, it's there's a lot of things that I see people doing, and I think most of the time I don't know where it comes from. I know Robert and Ryan wanted them to do, the Artists League wanted to do short poses, quick sort of sketching things. I'm not really sure why. I know his motives were that the first time you meet a face is the time when you really connect, and then trying to maintain that connection is difficult, and you should always remember that. I think he said that's having a good memory in terms of remember how you felt when you met that person. I don't think he was talking about drawing quickly. I think he was talking about not forgetting that first impression. But that's I don't know. I'm assuming that's the case. I don't know. But I'm of the opinion that it is about that first impression, and then you've got to hold that, and you've got to respond to that, and yeah. So I'm at the moment I'm going to sort out the beard, and not really going to go to town on this so much, but I will. It's going to be a rubber to do that. There is a sense of volume on this, which starts with this it being dark here, and then you've got the sort of darker area there under his chin and things. And but I think the alignments are okay. There's a few things that need sorting, like the nose and whatever. But I'm probably dropping that eye a little bit as well. So it's kind of down there, for instance. Then there's a bit of a highlight there. There's another highlight there. Not going to go too specific on this because of I'm not wanting to it's all right. I'm just focusing a minute. I'm not wanting it to be too solid around these areas, because what's going to happen if I make it too solid rather than this more vague tonal effect? If I make it too solid, it will just look silly that those lighter areas are just poking out from the a darker area. Maybe just start to increase the tones a bit, so it gives it. You can see it starts to give you more shape, and work on the light of things. Like I say, the nose wants a little bit of work. It tends to sort of come out there like that, and then it's more rounded, a little bit more rounder there, and then down into that way. So which is about right. I just want to take that back in there. One of the things about the homemade charcoal is that I find it's very easy to make marks without any effort. I know other charcoal will do that, but for me it's a biggie. If the charcoal doesn't make marks without any effort, then I don't get the subtleties that I'm trying to capture. So it's a big thing. The two big things that are for me with charcoal is it has to make marks without any effort, and secondly, it has to make a full range of marks. It can't just be something that makes a half black. It has to make a nice dense tone, which is if you've seen my other drawings, they are quite tonally dense, and it's this piece of charcoal. In fact, it was this exact piece of charcoal that drew yesterday's, I think, and the day before. So it was one of the things. Another thing about the homemade charcoal, you get a lot of life out of it, and when it gets really short, I stick it in one of these extender things, you know. But sometimes it doesn't fit. It's not a standard size, as you can see with that one. It's either that thickness or that thickness, or it may be even thinner, or may even get some that's not that comes out that isn't straight, which is a challenge. But I like it. I like it for that. Yeah. So at the moment it is sort the beard, just so that, let me just wipe my hands. One of the things about I hold the rubber in my hand, and it gets greasy, and it gets on my fingers, and I then try and smooth some of this out, and it will just put grease on the paper. So and I do it all the time, and I keep thinking I'll put the rubber down, but I don't. I keep it in my hand. But yeah, it's if I get push comes to shove and I can't do it, if I have to, I will use my sponge on a stick, which will do this, but it's not as controlled. You know, this where is it? This one. So it's a bit of sponge on the end of a stick. So I will do that just to break down but it's not like using your finger. You don't get the same kind of control over it. So, but I sometimes have to do that, as I say, because I've got too much grease on my fingers. Yeah, so things are looking okay now. I still have to, at this stage, I probably would consider it drawing now. I wouldn't consider it drawing when I first started. I just think it was just me establishing a few kind of shapes and tones. But at this stage, I'm now looking at the relationships proper, and looking at, say, you know, the length from that tip of that nose there, maybe to the corner of his eye there, but also from there to that eye. So I kind of do the, you know, the whole comparison thing. So it's not just in one area. It'll be all over the face that I'll make these comparisons. I'm going to start to put a few of the highlights in the beard, and try and imply some kind of you know, sort of curls or something, just because it'll just, without it being too detailed, by the way, because I'm not really. I think the drawing beards is about like drawing hair, as Robert Enright said. It's an integral part of the, you know, and a really important part of the portrait, but never try to draw it. And I think that's what I feel about hair. You know, I see people drawing every hair, and it's no better for it. You know, it doesn't need to be that detailed for me. I think it's better that I imply and suggest, and let people then complete the picture. And because everyone knows what hair looks like, everyone knows what a beard looks like. All I've got to do is create the effective volume, and they'll fill in the rest. I mean, I can put this sort of curly, this little bits of curl into it, but that's not. It's not really. You can see it starts. You can see that it's beard-like, but I'm not doing anything that's specific. I'm not interested in doing anything specific. There's a volume thing that's going on here, and it's kind of lighter here, for instance, and then darker there again. But that's really just through using a few light strokes into that, and it may get a little bit more precise as it gets further up. This is the transition there needs to be a little bit more precise. But other than that, this is not anything other than a few marks in the right direction, which is really how I treat hair anyway. I always think of it as a, you know, I'm implying the curls, or I'm implying the waves, but I'm not trying to draw them, and that way that lets the viewer can then complete the picture, if you like. But yeah, it's not a difficult thing to do that. And some people really struggle with drawing hair. It's because they try and draw it. You should never try and draw hair. It's such a difficult thing to do. I think the next thing after this, whether I put a background onto this or not, I don't know. I was thinking about just something, just to give it a bit of dynamicism. And I'm going to spend time, I would think, sorting out these tones so they're a bit more effective. I wouldn't say blend, but I don't really think about blending things. I'm going to sort of make them more effective, so there's more. Because you can make, as I said to a student this morning, you can imply tone without blending. It doesn't have to be blended for it to be, you know, have a tonal value. And I think at first, when I first started doing this, I once saw Zin Lim do exactly that. and it just was a revelation. He didn't really concern himself with the blending of the lines or the tones. He just applied lines, and it still gave the impression of tone, which is, as I said, a kind of revelation. And that I suppose is what I do. I do that all the time now. It's not really about the execution. It's about how it affects what people see, and how they interpret that. Anyway, yeah. So at the moment it is the sorting out the beard in this kind of delicate way, I suppose. But it's not really that far off being done, to be quite honest with you. So I'll just do these, and I might, as I say, put a background on it, just some tone, just to give it some lift. So it would be, sort of this kind of thing, which I quite like. It's almost when I've done that, I feel as though it's like a pop art thing. It's sort of John's face is sort of a pop art poster. You can see it, so it's like that. It gives it a crazy kind of dynamic feel. As I say, I might. It's only because of the lines as well, but I might just smudge this around so it's more of an even tone, and it helps me to clarify that edge there. But yeah, I'm when it comes to backgrounds, I'm kind of the only criteria I think for backgrounds for me is that if it helps the portrait not to float. We've gone through a phase of not drawing in the classes, not drawing floating heads, and because of their, it doesn't feel like it belongs on the paper kind of thing. So we've done sort of scenes, proper full-on portrait scenes, so where there's narrative and context and things. But as you can see, it kind of lifts the thing. And what's interesting to me is the way that backgrounds impact on the drawing, and that all of a sudden there's a need for edges to be not clarified but more belonging to. So that edge there belonging to the background more is kind of a almost like a requirement all of a sudden, because I've got this, suddenly put the background on there. But it's I like that. I like the way that happens. It's all, I suppose there's some science to it, and sort of visual science attached to that. But I just like the way that it becomes more than just a floating head. I think that's the thing that I'm interested in. But I do a lot of floating heads, having said that. So, and I do put a lot of tone on the background just to lift the head. But I don't know. I try and mix it up as much as I can. I can't do as many portraits as I do, and it not be different every time, or for me to exploit a certain way of working or whatever. It just makes it interesting. I'm trying to make it interesting for the students as well. So we do different subjects all the time, and as I said, sometimes it's full on portrait, sometimes it is floating heads. It is, and recently it's been more distorted. People looking up and things. Not too keen on gimmicky things. People sticking their tongue out and all that kind of stuff. Not too keen on that. I know it's a challenge, and people might say that that's a drawing challenge, but I'm not. I'm not in it for that. I'm not in it to prove that I can draw somebody smiling or laughing or whatever, or sticking their tongue out. I'm not interested in that. Drawing faces and is a challenge in itself. You don't need to sort of think of it as a proof of abilities or whatever. Yeah. So as it stands at the moment, I think that a quick assessment of things. I think that I'll sort the tonal balance of things a bit better. So this beard, it does come a bit further down. So the density there, these sort of inner dark parts do come a bit further down. But I'll sort that and make that more, give it more volume. I'm also going to make the head a bit smaller. I'm looking at that there, which is about right when it comes down to there. But then it's not. I don't think it's that big up there. So it's only tiny, but you can tell, I can see it. So that's what I'll do. I'll make things a little bit smaller down there, and then sort out the edges. And then the interesting thing about putting that on there, it kind of forces this to want to be lighter. So I've just done that. You can just see that there. You can see how that changes, and the volume of the head changes in relation to that background. For some reason, that background is telling me that this should be lighter, and by just simply doing that, and there's a lighter bit there as well. By simply doing that, all of a sudden it gets to be. You can start to see that the thing has more, or the head has more form as it sits on the paper. And it's good for taking that out as well. That's a distraction. The thing about what's important, what isn't important. I think that by giving it any kind of it, I tend to leave ears, for instance. Often I'll leave ears as just the briefest of scribbles, and because they're a distraction if you're not careful. It's that bit is not as important as that bit, so that bit's not going to get that much attention. So I tend to do that, and that's what was happening with this. This was too dark, so it was forcing me to take notice of it, and really it's not. I don't need to take notice. Maybe need to take notice of this bit, but not that bit. Also, this here is the bit that's really throwing the shape of the head out. So I'm just going to do that with it, really, just to try to get the because it comes straight to there and then it sort of lurches back like that. So I can just fix the sweep over the top of his head there, and then where the tone finishes, this bit here, the darker bit finishes, is roughly in line with his nose. So I can bring that down, and I know that's where it stops. So yeah, I'm more or less done with it now. As I said, it's just a case of tweaking all the tones, and a lot of the early marks, by the way, which are getting. Someone said to me, "Why don't you rub things out as you're moving along?" Because the early marks tend to become the tones, and they become the structure in a way of the tones. But that's probably what I do more than anything else. Rather than rubbing things out, I'd rather just let the thing show its formation, if you like. It's like it's showing its workings by you seeing those early marks. The one thing I've got to do as well is sort out the darker elements of it, where does need to be darkness like this, so that I can suggest and imply with more accuracy there. But the stuff like the nose, which you can see is working with the early marks, the early tones. You can see how that has got more tonal structure because of that, and that's because of the not rubbing out thing, by using the charcoal that was already on there and just allowing it to blend and become part of it. It almost, as I say, gives it a much more better tonal depth. Anyway, I'm done, and I'm going to just keep rambling if I'm not careful. So rather than keep rambling, I'm going to call it done, and then I'll finish off the beard and just tighten up a few things like the angles here and that, just that leap a little, that edge a little bit. It's probably a little bit bigger than what I've got it. Having said I said it was too small, or too big rather, but I think it's just about there. What I'm doing at the moment is that there are 3 points. If you've done the 3 dot thing with me, I sort of identify 3 things because it's easier. So I've got from there to there, and then from there to there as 3 dots, so I can see if those are right. But I've also got from there to the corner of his eye and then to the top of his head. So if my accuracy is right, then I'll have those things in the right place. The only thing, I think it's a little bit wide, so I'm going to just cut it a little bit further in there, and possibly do something with that. But that might be just simply be the height of it that's throwing it to make it look a bit wide. It's got to be a little bit darker down here as well, so that might be something that I'll continue to work on. But other than that, it's done. So right, I love you and leave you, and hopefully you recognise John, and I hope you like it, John.